The Bible is inspired prophetically. The Bible is inspired prophetically. In fact, this is probably the greatest evidence for me. That if you want to know like you know that this is a supernatural book, it's prophecy. How? Well, in the Bible, there are prophets, and these prophets predict the future. Well, how do they predict the future? Only God knows the future, right? And yet they predict the future accurately. How did that happen? Notice how the Apostle Peter puts this. He says this in 2 Peter. He says, "For no prophecy was ever produced by the will of man, but men spoke from God as though they were carried along by the Holy Spirit." I love that image of being carried along. I mean, many times the description of the Holy Spirit is the breath or the wind of God. And so you have this prophet who's like a sailing ship, and the wind of God is blowing him here and blowing them there and carrying him along. And what he spoke, what he wrote down, was the exact words that God wanted him to write down. And folks, that's how we have the Bible today. And we'll talk about that next week. Now, in the Bible, God gave this command. He said, if there's a prophet who makes predictions and they do not come true, he's a false prophet and he should be stoned. Now, if that law was still in effect today, there'd be a lot of dead people on the internet today, right? There would be. And yet, this book, the Bible, has fulfilled prophecy. In fact, the Old Testament alone has over 2,000 documented prophecies that came true. And let me just say, there is no other book like this. No religious book. You don't find it in Hinduism, Islam. They don't have any prophecies that come true. This book alone has fulfilled prophecies. No other book in human history. Now, through the years, have there been psychics and, spiritualists like Nostradamus who makes these predictions? Yeah. But you know what? Their predictions are so vague that it could refer to just about anything, right? I mean, if you ever go to a psychic, which I would not recommend, by the way, and you go to a psychic and they just come up with this vague prediction, in your future, you're going to meet a, handsome stranger, right? Well, that could refer to anybody. That could refer to me, man. I doubt that, but anyway. I mean, no, the Bible gives specifics, details. Like what? Prophet of Isaiah, largest prophecy in the Old Testament. He predicts that Israel is going to be taken into captivity. While they're in captivity, a king's going to rise. He's going to send them back to the promised land. And while they're there, they're going to rebuild the temple and Jerusalem. And this was all done 150 years before in advance. And he actually gives you the name of the future king. Check it out. Look at Isaiah. He says this, Cyrus. That's the name of the king. 150 years before he came about. Cyrus, he's my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purposes. And so sure enough, 150 years come by. Everything happened that Isaiah had predicted. In fact, archaeologists dug up this thing right here. It's called the Cyrus Cylinder, where it actually writes out everything that Cyrus commanded the Hebrews to do. Exactly what Isaiah had predicted. Also, Isaiah and Micah, they predict the coming of the Messiah, right? Okay, Isaiah said he's going to be born of a virgin. Well, that had never happened before. And, Micah says he's going to be born in a little podunk town called Bethlehem. Now, to us, Bethlehem is a big deal, but to them, it's nothing, right? It'd be like today, somebody making a prophecy saying this future king is coming, and he's going to be born not in a prominent city like Washington or Atlanta or Nashville. He's going to be born in Whitwell. Now, if you're from Whitwell, I'm not picking on you, okay? God bless you, right? But that's the way it would be, like Bethlehem. What good things born? What Bethlehem, right? And yet, that's exactly where the Messiah was to be born and where Jesus was born. David, writing 1,000 years before Christ came, predicts the crucifixion. What he wrote in Psalm 22. This is amazing. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. My enemies stare and gloat. They divide my garments among themselves and throw dice for my clothing. Every detail of those verses Jesus Christ fulfilled. Think about this. That was written 500 years before crucifixion was even a known means of execution, and yet he's describing it for you. How did all that happen? Could that just happen by chance? No. God predicts the future. You have the prophet Daniel. Daniel predicted that this coming kingdom was happening. And it was going to conquer the known world and then suddenly be cut off. It would be divided into 4, and then it would coalesce into 2 empires, and then that would be conquered by another empire, and then the Messiah would come. Well, guess what? 300 BC, you have this guy called Alexander the Great. He comes, he conquers the known world. When he came into Jerusalem, the religious leaders welcomed him and said, "Our prophet Daniel predicted your coming." And then what happened? He died, age 32, just suddenly cut off. His kingdom was divided among his 4 generals, and then they coalesced into 2 empires, the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic Empire. And then they were conquered by the Roman Empire, and then the Messiah came. Now, a lot of people will go, well, all those predictions, they probably were written down after the events happened. Well, guess what? Then they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were written before many of those events took place. How does this happen? How can there be predictions that come true? There's only one explanation. There's a God. This Bible is different than any other book. I mean, take the Messiah. I mean, I've done this before. Predictions about the Messiah. Which family he would come from, where he'd be born, where he would do his ministry, his betrayal, his crucifixion, his resurrection. It's all predicted in advance, right? In fact, jot this on your outline. There are 324 fulfilled predictions about the Messiah. 324 fulfilled predictions about the Messiah. Can I just tell you something? What are the odds of just one man fulfilling all those prophecies? It's a mathematical impossibility, and yet one man did, and his name is Jesus Christ. Folks, this is no other book is like this.